Hello, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner Radio Hour. This is airing Monday, May 26th, and as always, it is truly an honor to be here with you on WWCR Worldwide Radio. I think this is going to be winding down and maybe one of my last chances to have this conversation with you. This has been such an incredible experience for me. I have learned so much. I hope this has been an edifying experience for you as well. As always, you can find all of my work at CourtenayTurner.com. I spell my name like Courtenay, CourtenayTurner.com. And if you enjoy the work that I'm doing, please consider supporting. I will have this episode up on my video platforms as well as all the audio platforms. So if you want to listen to it again or watch it and see the visuals, you can do that at my website and choose whatever platform you prefer. And if you would like to see me continue on the radio, then please consider supporting the work that I'm doing. Unfortunately, it's just coming to a point where I don't think I can continue to afford to pay to be here with you. So if you do appreciate it and you would like to hear more from me, then you know where to find me. That's CourtenayTurner.com. And I have all sorts of ways you can support the work I'm doing. I do have a Substack. That's Courtenay Turner Substack. Again, I spell my name like Courtenay, and for the price of, like a coffee a month or a, latte a month, you could support the work I'm doing there, become a paid subscriber. And that is where you get all of my episodes first. I give them early access to all of my paid subscribers, as well as ad-free. I know the ads are not everyone's favorite. On many of the platforms, I don't have control over that, but on the Substack, for my paid subscribers, I do give ad-free content and early access. So that is one way. I also have a little Buy Me a Coffee. It's an orange circle with a mug in the middle on my website, and that's where you can click there, buy me a coffee or a few, and that helps to keep me going. I also have a Venmo option, and I have a snail mail option, which is Courtenay Turner, 6041 Rural Plains Circle, Suite 110, number 106, Franklin, Tennessee, 37064. And then we have some great affiliates. I'm really blessed to work with these people. They're all phenomenal products. We have the myredlight.com. I've been using it. I absolutely love the red light therapy, and this is really top of the line. They also have some starter products like the belt, which is so convenient. You could wear it anywhere. I've actually worn it during podcasts, so you can kind of multitask with that. And of course, we have the RNC store, so you can check out the website and see if there are products that work for you. We have the relaxed saunas, and so head on over. And also the Restore with Quartz, and I have an episode all about that coming out soon as well. So there's so many great ways that you can support the work I'm doing and find products that work for you as well, which is a win-win. We love that. So check all of that out. And we also still have the Cognitive Liberty Conference up. We will be at some point switching over the platform, but it's a great time to remind you of the Cognitive Liberty series, because actually the clip I'm going to play today is from a virtual Cognitive Liberty episode that I did. This was a roundtable on what I think is really one of the most important pressing topics of our time, and it is on technocracy. And I brought together three just really incredible gentlemen who I think are absolutely brilliant and doing tremendous work in this space. And it was really just, I thought it was a fantastic discussion, and it was such an honor to be able to host them and to see, where it went. I really wanted to, highlight their strengths, because there's obviously the umbrella topic of technocracy, and transhumanism is kind of an adjacent topic, but they all have such different areas of expertise within that realm. So I really wanted to be able to ask the questions that would shine their expertise and their strengths. And I think that really it was able to converge in a way that was really fruitful and certainly very edifying for me. So I hope it was for everyone else as well. We have Patrick Wood, who is, of course, the living expert on technocracy, and he has been studying this topic for almost as long as I've been alive, really decades. He's been diving into this and knows the history of these players so well, which is so important for us to understand the architecture of how this came to be, how we are, in the times that we are currently, and why it is that we feel like we're fighting the battles that we are. He really understands that and who the players are and, the plans that they've laid out and why we are up against what we're up against. And then, of course, we've got Ian Davis, and he is a phenomenal investigative journalist, and he's written some really incredible investigative pieces on this topic. He's also an author. He has a book, and he has actually really uncovered written about a lot of the philosophical underpinnings of some of the current technocratic movement that is surrounding the Trump administration. And we've certainly covered it quite a bit on my show as well. I've done an episode with him on this, but the Dark Enlightenment, these are not fun people to read. They're not great philosophers, in my opinion, but unfortunately they're important because they're very much influencing the movements that we're seeing today. So then we also have David Hughes, who has done an incredible series called The Omni War. He's written several books in this arena, and this is, of course, combining the multi-layered psychological warfare surrounding this topic, as well as some of the more technical type of biodigital convergence. And his Omni-War series that he recently put out was about 5 hours long and goes through with many different speakers. They talk about the, brain interface technology, and they lay out, where the known knowns, like the things that we can prove, the things that are quantifiable, and some of those are scary enough. The things where there's a lot of evidence for, but there's still speculation surrounding it. But we can prove that there's a lot of research and development in those areas, and certainly that shows intent. And then, of course, there's the documentation that is classified that we're, at least I'm not privy to. So, we can only speculate how far ahead some of that is. However, I think this topic is really important, as terrifying as it is. I've laid out some of that on my previous shows as well, talking about things like the biodigital convergence, showing the papers from Obama White House archives, talking about the cognitive plans, which are really essentially brainwashing to lay the groundwork for biodigital convergence. And of course, the biodigital convergence documents out of Policy Horizons in Canada, which is where that term comes from. But this the plan and technology has been in the works and been studied for much longer than that, for really going back many, many decades. So definitely check out all of that ancillary type of materials, right? This converging technologies for improving human performance. And this was back in 2002. So yeah, this is definitely, as I said, it's been decades that they've been working on this sort of thing. So so I thought this was just a really, really important topic. And I know a lot of people, talk about, like, when they think about totalitarianism, they think about tyranny, they talk about things like fascism and communism. And there's no argument for me that they have led to some of the most horrific atrocities in history. And I do not want to see a repeat of either of those. I certainly do not want to live under either of those types of regimes. However, I do think technocracy could lead to a type of tyranny that is really just unlike anything that we could possibly fathom. today. And yes, people will argue that, it's just another version of communism or fascism or, a hybrid of the two. Yes, it involves people obviously programming it. There's obviously an elite ruling class, although I don't think they deserve that term. I would rather call them the parasite class, the predatory class, the oligarchical structure that is trying to implement a techno neo-feudal society where we're all siloed in this like transhuman leading to a post-human world. That's what it seems like. So that while that may be true, it's still ruled by ultimately what they're implementing is code that will lead to technology controlling. And I know this is a really hard concept for people to really fathom. That's why I say I don't think that people really understand the kind of tyranny that if this were truly to be implemented, it could lead to. So I do think it's important. I think it's important to understand the trajectory, the history of this movement. And I think it's really important to understand that we have power. We do not have to comply. And if we learned anything over the past 4 or 5 years, I think that is what we really need to understand. And some people will say, well, if there's, let's use the example of like a smart dust, right? People say, well, we don't have control over that. We didn't opt into it. And there's so much control they can have with some of these technologies. Well, I don't deny that might be true. I don't have all of the information. Yes, I've discussed on previous episodes some of the technologies that do exist, and I have written an article which we'll go through in a bit. Outlining all of the Internet ofs, right? The Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Wearables. There's the Internet of Nanobio things. All of these things exist. And certainly they could have tremendous control, direct control, even remote brain potential. However, there's a reason why they keep, doing all of these kind of soft power like operations, all of the psychological operations to convince people to opt in, right? Why do they need people to do booster after booster if they could just remotely, control all of us? And I think that the answer is actually multi-layered. I don't think it's a one answer. I think there is actually a spiritual component to that. And I've discussed this before. I do think that, spiritually, if you look at it, particularly from a biblical framework, God wants to be chosen, right? He does not force his will on you. That's why he gave us the gift of free will. And I would make the argument that, Satan, Lucifer, is the same, wants to be chosen. So I do think there is this, spiritual kind of framework where they want you to opt into your own tyranny. They want you to choose it. And there is something very powerful about you choosing, whichever path it is. And so I think that's a huge part of it. I do also think that it's just not as effective. Human beings are incredible detox machines, and I do think the body has an incredible power to heal itself. And I think that if it were so effective remotely, I just don't think the technology is quite there. I know there's all the discussions about how the biofield's been hacked, and that there may be evidence to leaning in that direction. However, I think there's a reason why they wanted people to be boosted to the max. So, and why they're continuing to push for things like mRNA technology. So that like I said, I think there's a lot of layers to this, but ultimately my main takeaway is that we have the power not to comply. And I keep using the example, if people chose to bare their face a few years ago, I don't think that they would have been successful in moving to the next step of getting people to take experimental drugs. So I think that's what we really need to keep in mind next time around. Hopefully there's not, but I think they don't rest, right? They're continuously trying. So that's a big takeaway. I know some of this stuff can be really dark. So I just want to remind people, you have free will. It is your duty. It's incumbent upon you to exercise it. And I believe exercising free will, you choose, but if you That means you can choose your freedom. So let's dive into a little bit of, I've just taken some notes and I thought I would outline some stuff before I play a clip for you. And this is just going to be, we'll have a little discussion and then I will play a clip from the episode. And of course, if you want to listen to the rest of the episode, you'll head on over to CourtenayTurner.com, again spelled like Courtenay, CourtenayTurner.com, and find the platform that you prefer to listen or watch. And you can see the full episode. So I thought we would start with what is technocracy, and I would read to you from actually the Technocrat magazine from 1937, because it's a few paragraphs, but I think it's worth actually reading, and you can find this yourself. Of course, you'll have to go to the Wayback Machine, otherwise known as archive.org, and it is up on there, and you can find this and read it for yourself, but I'll read it to you right now. What is technocracy? The advance of technocracy on the North American continent through the ever-increasing use of extraneous, other than human, energy is bringing about the first major social change in history. Technocracy is not agitating for this change, it's preparing for it. Technocracy. This is very key line here. Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population of this continent. For the first time in human history, it will be done as a scientific, technical engineering problem. There will be no place for politics or politicians, finance or financiers, rackets or racketeers. And I will read the rest of it, but I'm going to just interject here for a minute, because this line where they say, first of all, that they explicitly say that it's social engineering, I think that's a key takeaway. And then they say there will be no place for politics or politicians, right? That this is really important to remember this when we think about people like Curtis Yarvin, who, was a neo-reactionary, very instrumental in this dark enlightenment movement that is a huge influence on people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, a lot of even J.D. Vance, people who are surrounding the Trump administration currently. And they have this policy, Curtis Yarvin has a policy called RAGE, which means retire all government employees. So it's the same, this is a holdover from Technocrat magazine in 1937, where Technocracy Inc. has already laid this out. We're going to do away with politicians. Back then, they didn't have the technology, though, to replace human politicians with AI, but they do today. And that is really where they're headed. That's what they've told us. I'm not saying that's what, has to happen, but that is what they've told us they're preparing. So I wanted to point that out. Technocracy states that this method of operating the social mechanism of the North American continent is now mandatory because we have passed from a state of actual scarcity into the present status of potential abundance, in which we are now held to an artificial scarcity forced upon us in order to continue a price system which can distribute goods only by means of a medium of exchange. Technocracy states that price and abundance are incompatible. The greater the abundance, the smaller the price. So you're talking about like supply and demand, essentially. In a real abundance, there can be no price at all. Only by abandoning the interfering price control and substituting a scientific method of production and distribution can an abundance be achieved. Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. The technate will encompass the entire American continent, from Panama to the North Pole, because the natural resources and natural boundaries of this area make it an independent, self-sustaining geographical unit. Technocracy's blueprints have been designed for this continent and for no other. So the technate is this whole region of the North American Union, essentially. And I will show later, you can find it from the Technocracy study manual. They actually have that map. this map was circulating through the internet. It's very similar to the map that was the Club of Rome's, where they had their regionalized adaptive globalization. But that was their regionalized power blocks, which were, there were 10 of them, but the technate was the same. So that was very interesting. So it's from the Panama to the North Pole, because the natural resources, natural boundaries make an independent, self-sustaining geographical unit. Technocracy's blueprints have been designed for this continent and no other. It is an American plan for the American continent. No imported political philosophies, including democracy, are in any way applicable. So this it is very commensurate with people like Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land, Dark Enlightenment, who say, and even Peter Thiel, who says that, he no longer thinks that, democracy is applicable. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something about like freedom is not compatible. I'll have to find it. I don't want to butcher it, but 1940 or before is the calculated date for the breakdown of the price system dictating the need for the technate. This calculation is based upon the relentless, inevitable increase in the use of extraneous energy as a substitute for human labor. By 1940, there will not be enough money to pay envelopes to purchase the goods produced. The government is already making up the difference with money raised by borrowing and taxation. There is a limit beyond which this cannot go. The financial collapse of private industry and government, which will accompany the approaching social change, will be a symptom and not a cause. Lesson 21 of Technocracy Study Course states, that's where that map is from, the Technocracy Study Course, the welfare of the human beings involved is the ultimate and paramount importance. Every individual on the American continent will, under technocracy, achieve a standard of living with the security from birth to death that is wholly impossible even for the most favored citizens today. So he's essentially talking about some sort of like UBI. And this is very interesting to bear in mind when you start thinking about where things are headed with a lot of this talk about cryptocurrency, digital currencies, and tokenization. They're talking about, back then, this was right after, the Depression in the late 20s. And there were, I think that, as usual, there's always some, of course, there are some sociopathic, and Machiavellian type of, megalomaniacs who just want to control the world, and they're just really greedy. That those always exist, but I think there's also oftentimes people who really are utopian. They're idealists, and they think they're smarter, and therefore they're the evolved elect, right? Essentially the Gnostic elect, right? That they think that they are doing good by planning this infrastructure for the masses, because they're the elect that has evolved, and they're the rulers who should create this new plan, and they think it will be for the benefit of everyone. So I just want to caveat that not everybody who's doing this is doing it necessarily to try and control others or for some sort of really sinister. They might really think they're doing good. But unfortunately, utopia means nowhere. And oftentimes, when implemented, utopian visions result in dystopian realities. So but I think there's a lot of parallel to what was happening then, where I think they really were trying to come up with a system, that would create an abundance that was, to rectify the problems that they were facing with the economic crisis of the time. But I see a lot of parallels, because there's a lot of discussion about, the volatility of the dollar, the geopolitical climate, and that we need to move into this other system. Of course, the fiat currency that is, they say is doomed to implode. And so they're talking about a new system being implemented, and there is a lot of talk about a tokenized type of economy. And I just want to point out these parallels, and unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to work out quite as idyllic as they may envision. So traditionally, technocracy is thought of as a form of governance or societal organization where decision making is led by technical experts, science or engineers, and it's prioritizing data-driven solutions. Efficiency, where we heard that term before, that's right. Doge is not there at their job, and not to say that I'm opposed to them exposing the fraud and doing away with the bloated overspending, all of that. That's great, but I don't want it to be replaced by AI, right? I don't want the efficiency to come from machines. So that's my concern. But hopefully we'll have a window of opportunity in the meantime, and people should seize that opportunities wherever they can. Absolutely. So scientific principles over political and democratic processes. It emphasized, right, this is a very reminiscent of what did Curtis Yarvin say in his, what was it, that uh, unresolved or unqualified unqualified reservations. I think it was back in 2008. He wrote this long manifesto, and in it he says how, I think it was in that, and then he also had a speech maybe in 2012 where he said unqualified reservations. That is what it was. That was in 2008, but I think it was in 2012 when he had a speech, and he said how Americans need to get over their fear of a dictator. Because GovCorp is essentially the CEO dictator. So he said this repeatedly. This isn't a one-off kind of thing, but I think it's relevant. My point is this is very much in line with this traditional technocracy philosophy. Where they don't want democratic processes, and that would include any kind of a constitutional republic, because the United States we're not a democracy, but there is a democratic element to our electoral process. So he wants to do away with all of that because he wants it to be run by a GovCorp. So this is essentially where everything becomes privatized. And I think a lot of people have a mindset where private is better, but private means it's less transparent, and it means that the tech billionaires, oligarchs, essentially could have complete control, and you can't. They have complete purview, right? Because it's their company. So not so sure that will mean more freedom. I think that could be even more totalitarian potentially. And it leaves a lot of power for these public-private partnerships. So it also emphasizes the application of technology and specialized knowledge to manage resources, infrastructure, public policy, and often aiming to optimize things like energy, transportation, or economics. So some of the key features, experts rule, right? That's a kind of the traditional thought. Data and technology, the policies rely on algorithms, AI, and scientific models. So that's the big difference that we're seeing with technocracy today versus technocracy back in the 30s, right? Because they didn't have AI. They didn't have the technology to really bring this to fruition. So they were thinking more just like the technical expertise or ruled by the scientific elite. But now we have that technology, and I don't have the quote from Technocracy, but they talked about how the purpose of all the data mining, the surveillance, and they might not have used those specific words, but they were saying that the purpose of it is to control, right? Whatever you can surveil, whatever you can track, whatever you can measure, you can control. And that is the purpose of it. And they were pretty transparent about that. Centralized control, decision making, top down. So minimizing public input. This is very much aligned with like the GovCorp type of principle that Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land, and of course a lot of these Silicon Valley types who are influenced by this philosophy, the Dark Enlightenment neo-reactionary philosophy, are adopting. The term merged in the 20th century through technocracy movement in North America, which proposed that replacing all politicians with engineers to manage the economy scientifically. Today, it manifests in practices like smart cities or digital surveillance or AI-driven policy tools. So Yes. So that is, and then I have the Technocracy study course, and I think that you should definitely look that up. It's really interesting. You can see the map. They also, I have this little section there. I wanted to read from it. It says Technocracy Inc. And I remember that Elon Musk's grandfather, Josh Handelman, was one of the leaders of this Technocracy Inc. from 1936 to 1943 in Canada. And it is they say it's a nonprofit membership organization incorporated under the laws of the state of New York. Right. It started out, and Patrick Wood made a comment about how, it started out in Columbia University with, these intellects and the academics, and then it moved to kind of the trash, and then it moved back to being kind of the, again, an academic field, and now we've got I'm paraphrasing him, but essentially he was referring to like Curtis Yarvin and Nick Land, who, although they may be thought of as an academic intellectuals, he was basically saying we have like garbage material again. So I think it was kind of true. I've read their material, and it's kind of hard to get through. It's kind of like reading Marx, who thought he was so, well-spoken and wrote so beautifully. And to me, I think it's kind of trash, but not well written. It's not enjoyable reading. So, and the ideas are really kind of garbage. So you can read it for yourself, make your own decision. That's my opinion. And the gentleman on the panel agreed with me on that. So, but anyhow, so Technocracy Inc. operates only in North American continent through the structure of its own continental headquarters, area controls, regional divisions, sections, and organizes as a self-disciplined, self-controlled organization. It has no affiliations with any other organization, movement, or association, whether in North America or elsewhere. Technocracy points out that this continent has the natural resources. The natural resources here are very, very, they bring this up all the time. They seem to be a key point. The physical equipment and the trained personnel to produce and distribute an abundance. Technocracy finds that the production and distribution of an abundance of physical wealth on a continental scale for the use of all continental citizens can be only accomplished by a continental technological control, the governance of function, a technate. And we've heard Elon Musk talking about he's building a technate on Mars. I don't think he's building a technate on Mars. I think he's trying to implement a technate through his involvement in the current administration. Technocracy declares that the continent has a rendezvous with destiny, that this continent must decide between abundance and chaos within the next few years. Technocracy realizes that this decision must be made by a mass movement of North Americans trained and self-disciplined, capable of operating a technological mechanism of production and distribution on the continent. When the present price system becomes impotent to operate. Technocracy Inc. is notifying every intelligent and courageous North American that has his future tomorrow rests on what he does today. Technocracy offers the specifications and blueprints of the continental physical operations for the production of abundance for every citizen. So that is from the Technocrat magazine. Howard Scott, who is one of the originators of Technocracy Inc. And of that movement. And then they say that it is the governance of societal organization driven by technical experts and data-driven systems is being implemented in various ways globally. Currently, that's what so various ways that we see this. We see the data-driven governance, right? This is something we're seeing. Governments and institutions are increasingly relying on big data, AI, predictive algorithms to shape policy and decision-making. Examples include smart city incentives and initiatives like Singapore's Smart Nation program. So you can go check that out. That's smartnation.gov.sg. And you can learn more about a smart nation that we can trust, right? That's always how it's promoted. This is where urban planning, traffic management, and public services are using real-time data. So they're using the Internet of Things already, that technology. Of course, you've got China's social credit system, which also uses data, AI, biometric data to monitor, surveil the citizens' behaviors. This is, very much tied into things like the Internet of Behaviors. And then if you want some more information on how all of these various types of smart cities and 15-minute cities, uh, the C40 cities, which are all around environmental compliance to combat the climate crisis, as they call it. I wrote an article on Substack. It's called "The Path to Mass Surveillance and Technological Singularity." And I outline all of these different types. And, some of them, this is actually something that came up, and David had mentioned this a few times in our conversation, that he was really, he was very pleased, but he was surprised to see how much the topic of deception, the fact that they constantly, a lot of the figures change their names. On my last radio hour, we talked about the Civium project, right? This is Jordan Hall, and he was originally R. Jordan Greenhall, and then he changed his name to Jordan Greenhall. Now he's just Jordan Hall. And he's just one example. This isn't to pick on him, but we see a theme here, right? Where there's the company that he works for. He works with the Schmachtenberger. So James Schmachtenberger, whose brother is Daniel Schmachtenberger. These are all GameD people. They created a company that was originally called Neurohacker, and it is now called Qualia Life. And again, I don't know why it's changed, but Peter Thiel, with his Prospera, he has a subsidiary that was called Vitalia, and it's now called Infinita. So these are just a couple of examples. The list goes on and on and on, right? Infinita is the city that never dies. But Vitalia, the tagline was a city where death is optional. So this is all couched in longevity. It does seem to be kind of a transhuman or transhuman adjacent type of a movement. In this Substack article, I go through all the different types of Internet of, right? So we've got the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of Nanobio things, Internet of Behaviors, Internet of Everything, Internet of Medical Things, Internet of Industrial Things, Internet of Smart Cities. That's what brought this up. And the Internet of Wearable Things. Right, this is all the fitness trackers, that sort of thing, but also with medical devices as well. Internet of Robotic Things, which I think is going to become increasingly more relevant in the next few years. Right? Doesn't Elon tell us that in 2040 there's going to be more robots than humans? So yes, and of course, Elon is certainly not alone in all of this chip technology. Accelerating Starship's development to build a Martian technocracy. Yeah. We heard back in 2016, Klaus Schwab was talking about how people would have chips and that would connect you with essentially with the internet, with all of the digital realm. And of course, BlackRock has their chip. There's a lot of these. I think Sweden has one that's, a lot of people have already taken and already had that implemented. So the Black Mirror episode on the grain is really not like, science fiction. People are already living lives this way. So I don't know that it's exactly the grain, but it's, similar kind of concept technology. So this is data-driven governance. And then we've got the AI World Society. And this is the social contract for the AI age, advocate for a social global system that leverages AI to create value for individuals, communities, and a society as a whole. This is, of course, part of the vision for the centennial of the UN. Right, this is 2045. The UN was created in 1945. So this is for the centennial in conjunction with the Boston Global Forum, and based on Michael Dukakis, the former governor of Massachusetts, his book "Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment." And you can find, on their G7 initiative, they did they outline the social value reward system that recognizes and rewards systems and contributes to the common good, including initiative and creative endeavors. Sounds great. This is part of their G7 Summit Initiative official, and it's their PDF. And I'll just read you the social value reward system. They explicitly say this is not a social credit system like China. I think that's just because it sounds much nicer and sounds meritocratic, but essentially it is very, very similar. And I think they just know that a lot of people, there's a lot of pushback. A lot of people, particularly in the West, are not thrilled about adopting that type of a system with a social credit biometric surveillance. So what they say is it's a social value reward system. This system would provide a way for citizens to track their contribution to society. Who determines those contributions? I'm guessing it's going to be the UN. So as well as a way for society to acknowledge those contributions, will be rewarded. It would be to allocate reward based on citizens' adherence to norms. So pay attention to that. Who's dictating those norms? And are they aligned with your norms and your values? That might be something to ask, such as their dedication and their innovative, creative contributions. It stands in sharp contrast to China's social credit system. That's what they say. It doesn't seem that way to me, but that is what they say, which is a mechanism of state control based on a blockchain system. So this social value reward system would be based on the blockchain. It would not have government input or be accessible by government. Right, because governments are all going to be replaced by AI. They don't mention that part right here, but they do say that in the AI World Society documents. So this would be based on a blockchain system, and reward would be allocated by civic-minded non-governmental organizations. So the NGOs are going to be in charge. The system is used to recognize and honor citizens for their contribution to society. And they say punitive action is prohibited, but I don't know how it's going to be enforced otherwise. So that is questionable. The social value reward would permit citizens to evaluate the leaders of governmental institutions, governments, and non-government organizations and firms for their contribution to society. The SVR would accord with the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation and the ethics guidelines for trustworthy artificial intelligence issued by the European Commission's high-level expert group on artificial intelligence. And so you can look into that, but it sounds exactly like a social credit system. They just have lots of different names for all of these things. And that was kind of the thing that I pointed out with the, various types of smart cities, 15-minute cities in that article is, here Trump is talking about freedom cities. And it's essentially the same thing, but much better marketing for people who are freedom-minded, people who don't want a control grid. But of course, all of this technological surveillance is implemented in these, it's deregulation for the technology, and the people like Peter Thiel are championing this. This is what Bitcoin cities at Prospera is. They're the deregulated autonomous zones, and but it gives a lot of power to those, Silicon Valley tech billionaires. I don't know how much power it would give to, the everyday person. And then we have things like I talk about, the Civium project. That was we did that last week on the radio hour, so you can check that out. It's up on my channel. But it's just to give you an idea of how they give you the different flavors. You can go to the buffet and you can choose your flavor of poison, the one that you prefer. But just remember, there's poison in all of it. So, all right. So then we've got the digital ID and surveillance systems. Technocratic systems often leverage digital identification for centralized control. And we've got so many different variations of this, right? India's got their Aadhaar system, which links the biometric data to services. We've got ones in Europe, in Africa. And yeah, we've got these systems all over the place, and I've gone through some of these types of technologies, that Silicon Valley's making, like the orb. Of course, we the TSA is tracking your biometric data now, even here in the United States. So we've got the Real ID that's coming down the pike, and already implemented in many states. So this is definitely something that needs to be on people's radars, that they're tracking all of your biometric data, and they're, starting to implement these various types of digital identification. And even if we don't have digital ID, fully implemented, they've already laid the groundwork by tracking our biometric data. So this becomes very relevant when we start thinking about cryptocurrencies and we start thinking about tokenized type of economy and society. So these surveillance systems could be quite tyrannical if they enforce something like a social value reward system or a social credit system predicated upon it. So, and the thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't have to be just a top-down, authoritative, centralized body like the UN. It doesn't have to be coming from the AI World Society or central banks in the form of central bank digital currency, right? This could be done through network states. This could be done through private companies. This could be done through, whatever decentralized modality that a game B type of society creates. So again, they give you the different flavors. And so, if there's chemicals in your ice cream, just remember that you may prefer chocolate, you may prefer strawberry, you may prefer, vanilla, whatever flavor you like. But remember, there's you're going to be swallowing some of those chemicals unless it's the real thing. So that's kind of how this works. They give you the flavor that's more palatable to you, and then you have the illusion of choice. But I'm not saying we don't have choice. I think we can still push back, but we need to know what it is that we're pushing back against. So the automation and AI in public policy, these are AI tools used in economic policies, healthcare systems, climate strategies, right? I've done episodes on the Climate Smart Commodity Project. This was tied to the whole natural asset companies, which they've rebranded. Again, the rebranding, right? The Sustains Act, same thing. They just, pivot, rebrand. So they give you a different flavor, that you might prefer. Different clever marketing. And so we've got a bunch of these all over the world right now. The European Union is doing AI-driven models for environmental regulation and resource allocation. Just an example, there's automated decision-making welfare systems like in Australia, and there was a whole scandal with that. That was the robo-debt. So you can look that up, and they show how the algorithms, it's essentially algocracy. There, I said it. I don't know why that's so hard for me to pronounce, but algocracy, which is really what we're headed towards, and it's very, very dystopian. And you get a taste of this with the cybernetic algorithmic feedback loops on the social media platforms, right? So this is where certain things get popped up, certain things get censored, you get siloed, you get, spoon-fed things that are going to trigger you or that'll put you into some sort of a feedback loop or an echo chamber. So we've got corporate technocracy. So private tech giants like Google and Amazon and Meta influence societal structure through proprietary algorithms, data monopolies, and infrastructure control. And, as I was just saying, they play a significant role in shaping the public discourse, right? You might go online and you see a lot of discourse and people fighting very passionately about topics that in your day-to-day life never come up. But it becomes your whole world because that's all you see when you go into you open up your app. And so that becomes your virtual reality. And what did Courage Jarvin say? And we talked about this too. I believe it was David who had repeated this quote. He said it was one of the most horrifying quotes he'd ever read out loud, where Curtis Yarvin talks about how he said the humane alternative to genocide would be to create virtual humans. So Create virtual humans. So basically siloed us into the metaverse where we don't have actual real reality. That's more humane. I don't know. I'm not sure about all that. But yeah. All right. So we're going to start winding down because we're running out of time. And I want to play at least a little bit from this. So essentially, I think the main thing I would like you to check out, especially if you're in the United States, because I think a lot of people here have this kind of illusion that this is far away and that we don't have to worry about it, and that's not true at all. We have these. You can go to events.govtech.com, and you can find all of these various digital governance summits that are in almost every state already. And so they have these digital government summits, IT leadership forum. Of course, they talk about cybersecurity. You can go through and look through all of this on the website. I have done episodes where I showed like chatgpt.gov. You have to be a government official to use that portal. But yeah, so we don't have to wait for the AI World Society, which is 2045. They're already really looking into this kind of control by government and using smart contracts and AI. And they're talking about implementing things on the blockchain, things like where I've talked a lot about this transpolitical movement, right? Game B talks about transpolitical. It's one of their terms, but there's all these different movements. And I am going to put something together on the United Independents. I've talked about them before. This was Christopher Light's party. This is transpolitical movement, transcending the two-party system. And while I know people see flaws in the two-party system, I'm not denying that. But this idea of putting everything up on the blockchain because you're going to have more democracy is a very scary proposition to me. It's couched in all these terms like ranked choice voting and liquid democracy and quadratic voting, conviction voting. They have all these different names. Again, they're going to give you whatever flavor is more palatable for you. So yeah, we've got also things like in the healthcare system, right? COVID was a really good example of how they use a lot of the technology with all the medical, wireless body area networks and all these contact tracing apps and whatnot. And of course, I talked about the central bank digital currency. So I'm going to wrap this up. I will play just a short clip because I have rambled on for so long. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, the digital cities. Definitely check those out as well. So definitely, if you want to listen to the full episode, I think it was fantastic. I am so honored that they were willing to come on and have this really important conversation. And I highly encourage you to check out this part of the Cognitive Liberty series because I think that if we can be informed, inspired, then we can be empowered to preserve cognitive liberty and preserve and exercise our free will. And if you would like to see more from me, please head on over to my website and, support in whatever way you can. Sometimes supporting is, I know not everybody can give physical support, although I really do need it. You can definitely give thumbs up on the episodes, share it with anybody you think it would be valuable to, anybody who might benefit from hearing this information. And, that's you can leave reviews. And of course, there's all the ways that you can support the work that I'm doing are available on the website. So head on over to CourtenayTurner.com. That's Courtenay, CourtenayTurner.com. As always, it's an honor. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the clip. So let's start with just a brief overview of what is technocracy and why does it matter? Why should we be so concerned? Why is this such a pressing socio-political issue currently? Who wants to start? Patrick,
start?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Originally, technocracy was defined as the science of social engineering. That's scary because that's how we see this all over the place right now. The science of social engineering, basically as an economic system that was coined in the 1930s. It was a resource-based economic system, not based on supply and demand. Everybody understands supply and demand. That's how we get our pricing system. That's how we get the exchange of money, et cetera. They wanted to do away with everything that we had before that in history, and they wanted to rule it simply by fiat, by scientific algorithm, if you will. And these were top scientists and engineers at Columbia University, no less.
Yeah, absolutely. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, Patrick and Ian have covered most of the key points. One word which hasn't come up so far is totalitarianism. I would say that in the original formation of technocracy, they were responding to the Great Depression and the crisis of capitalism and looking for an alternative. But over time, that idea has increasingly morphed into something totalitarian. So even in the mid-20th century, when you look at the writings of Aldous Huxley and Bertrand Russell and others, Brzezinski, they're talking about a scientific dictatorship. So they've clearly picked up on the potential here for centralized total control through scientific means, and particularly owing to Rockefeller influence and inward investment into China, actually, in terms of R&D particularly, to try and develop these technologies.
We are adopting this quite enthusiastically in many cases without once considering what it would mean to have, for example, a chip inside your body that can certainly act as a transmitter, but also a receiver. So I think we really need to kind of step back a bit and think whether this is something that a path that we should even contemplate going down.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Then David, you want to add to that?
You mentioned the noosphere, which is an idea, I think, associated with Pierre de Teilhard de Chardin, a French thinker. And he wasn't alone in coming up with these kinds of ideas in the early to mid 20th century. And I was very interested while reading Jacob Nordangard's two books, Rockefeller Controlling the Game and The Global Coup d'etat, to see that there's a connection actually between these kinds of ideas and Rockefeller funding, and also dreams of connecting human consciousness to the internet, the cloud, brain computer interfaces, and so on. These things actually go hand in hand. So what we've been talking about is an obvious affront against Christianity.
But by necessity, they had to be visible for a period of time. And so we were able to take shots at them at that point. And we did. Then they went underground. Totally underground. You couldn't find anything about the Trilateral Commission during the Reagan years, the Bush years. Even though Bush was a member of the Trilateral Commission himself, you couldn't find hardly anything on it. And even in the Clinton years, they were both members of Trilateral Commission, Gore and Clinton themselves. But nevertheless, they never surfaced again. You had no group photos, if you will, to say there they are all together, and so they just hid. This was expressed in David Rockefeller's memoirs, how they were able to hide in plain sight all those years, and they're still hiding in plain sight right now. That is the Trilateral Commission members. They're still there. They're just not public.
He said, quote, "Our goal, in short, is a humane alternative to genocide. That is, the ideal solution achieves the same result as mass murder, the removal of undesirable elements from society, but without any of the moral stigma. The best humane alternative to genocide I can think of is not to liquidate the wards, i.e. the people, either metaphorically or literally, but to virtualize them. A virtualized human is in permanent solitary confinement, waxed like a bee larva into a cell which is sealed except for emergencies. This would drive him insane, except that the cell contains an immersive virtual reality interface which allows him to experience a rich, fulfilling life in a completely imaginary world. Now, that is one of the most horrific quotations that I have ever read out. But again, when you think of, for example, Yuval Noah Harari in 2020, when talking about what he calls the useless class and what's to be done with it, and he said, I don't know, just give them video games.